Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jazakallah khair for coming. If you're coming from yesterday, welcome. If you're coming today, inshallah, you're enjoying the convention so far. So today is the second part of the Aqeedah workshop led by Dr. Imad Bayoun. And just a little quick bio about him. He's an officer at the entomology department at UCR. He's a very active worker in the Muslim community and as the organization. So, here's Dr.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله
Who can remind
وبركاته.
us of some of the things that we discussed yesterday? In the back, one of those in the back, you can come forward.
Is it open book?
It's open book. You can look at your notes. That's fine. Sisters in the back, you can move forward, inshallah. Or if you're not, leave here. Yes.
We talked about Hidayah and
Okay.
we spoke about how the different characteristics of high schoolers and what they experience in high school.
Well, first, we spoke about the importance actually of belief, of developing a belief or a aqeedah. And we said that aqeedah, the word used for that in the Quran and the Hadith, is Iman. But we also said that Iman is not just an intellectual experience, but it includes other components as well that feeds back into it, other components. And then we also said that it is the responsibility of the parents to teach the kids. So that's why there's an obligation. A person cannot just care about himself or herself, but we have to care about our kids. This is someone that will be actually accountable for, will be responsible for before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we also said that the job of the parents in that regard is to explain and to give the directions and the information. So when we said that, when we're talking about the meaning of Hidayah, we said that Hidayah or guidance, as it is translated, can mean either showing actually the road to somebody, or explaining or showing the direction, but then and this is what the parents actually should do. But then afterward, whether they take on that direction or not, this is their own choice. But of course, the support should always be there. We always support them, we always help, and as long as it is needed. And we also, among the things that we discussed, we said that there are other factors that affect the belief of the kids. Of course, the focus actually for us is the high schoolers. We said there are other factors that affect that. It is not just basically what I teach, but it also the other factors that are surrounding that whole thing. So we said that the environment of the house actually plays an important role. The type of relationship with the parents, or the husband and the wife, the father and the mother. These play actually an important role. What else did we say? We said, you mentioned some of the characteristics actually, or the qualities of the growing adults. What? Oh, somebody's sitting outside. Okay, what else did we say? They question now, because keep in mind what we're talking about, or the group that we're dealing with here, is basically somebody who's transitioning into adulthood. So somebody basically who used to be not long before, used to be basically a child, and he's becoming an adult. And the parents sometimes may have difficulties accepting or still seeing that child as an adult. And the kids, of course, they want to become an adult overnight. And that creates conflicts in communication. So that's why one of the basically qualities of the kids in that, or the children actually in that period, is that they question everything. They argue sometimes a little too much, and they're overly trusting their own, intellectual abilities. And this is not bad in itself, of course, but of course it has to be directed in the proper direction, so as not to lead into arrogance or excessively, basically, trusting one's own goodness. Inshallah, one gadget. So this, I feel more important this way. What else did we say?
Without feeling.
Allah, very few better. What else did we say? We discussed this today. What are some of the things that we discussed yesterday? Who can remind us?
Guidelines on teaching the Aqeedah.
What?
Guidelines on teaching the Aqeedah, the Tawheed, Tawbah.
Guidelines. What did we say about that?
We did start with the Tawheed.
Yes, Tawheed. We said something a little specific about Tawheed. Remember what we
The
said?
Hadith of Ibn Abbas, Ihfadullah Yahfadak.
Yes. So when we're talking about teaching the Tawheed or teaching the Aqeedah or the belief, we're talking about not teaching it in an academic way, a dry academic way, but something that is connected to reality. And this is the way, by the way, the Quran approached teaching the Aqeedah. When you read, for example, the beginning of Surah Al-Mujadila, here's basically a woman coming to the Prophet ﷺ arguing about a specific private matter, discreetly. And the surah starts with, anybody knows the beginning of Surah Al-Mujadila? قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلًا لَتُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا وَتَشْتَكِي إِلَى اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ يَسْمَعُ تَحَاوُرَكُمَا. And then, وَاللَّهُ
سميع عليم.
وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ وَسَمِيعٌ بَصِيرٌ.
سميع بصير.
سَمِيعٌ بَصِير. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that Allah heard the one who's arguing with you about the private matter, and Allah hears the conversation or heard the conversation. Allah is the all-hearing, the all-seeing. So the conclusion of that verse is connected to the beginning of it. So after presenting Allah heard the discussion, Allah is all-hearing and all-seeing. So there has to be a connection between the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the way we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the earlier part. Not just pure academic way that is dry, not connected to reality. What else have we said? And we mentioned the example where the hadith of Ibn Abbas, where the Prophet ﷺ told him, "Ihfad Allah, ihfad." Be mindful of Allah, Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah, you'll find Him where you need Him. If you were to ask Allah. If you were to seek anyone's help, seek the help of Allah. I know of the whole world you're not to benefit you in any way. They will not benefit you except by that which Allah will to happen for you. If they are not to harm you in any way, they will not harm you except by that which Allah will to happen to you. What else did we say?
Concepts of the Tawbah.
What?
Concepts of the Tawbah.
The concept of the Tawbah. And the importance of emphasizing that, especially at that age. Because at that age, especially, anyway, they're becoming adult, physically adult, and the issue of sexual desires and all of these things. So they may do certain things. I'm not talking about committing big sins, But I think to always remind them that the doors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always be open. And no sin is too big for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive. But of course things have to be done differently. If I want to, basically maintain that tawbah, there are certain things that have to be done differently. But to always remind them of the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never close, our connection with Him. Will never close the doors. So it's always open, no matter what, to emphasize that. Anything else that we discussed?
Continuous dua.
To teach them to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give them that as a tool in dealing with any hardship, with any situation, with any difficulties. That you're not facing basically this challenge on your own. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always with you. Allah is always on your side. So in other words, when I'm faced with any difficulty, with any hardship, with any challenge, I'm not facing that alone. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always actually with me, supporting me. That's why to keep that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I would say actually I was telling a brother once that even if you're going on your way to do something haram, always say, subhanallah, Ya Allah forgive me. Am I joking? What am I talking about? A person is about to do something wrong and he's also making dhikr. Yes. First of all, it is better with than without. Because first of all, the Prophet did say, لا يزال لسانك رطبا بذكر الله. Keep your tongue moist by the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other thing is that sometimes the remembrance of the tongue will affect the heart and the person will stop. So don't think the person or the youth should not think to themselves that, well, I'm sinning anyway, so I might as well take the scenic route. I might as well sin all the way. No. Don't do that. Basically, whatever you can do in the right direction is something that should be done. Anything else that we discussed?
Actually, we started the discussion about mentoring, but we didn't discuss
Mentoring?
Yeah, like the good way that those teens could be taught is having a mentor.
Yes.
But there's a difference between this mentor is outsider or the parent. And
this is one of the points that you raised, is that sometimes the kids at that age, they may accept anybody's advice except that of their parents. Because their parents are there and they give me advice all the time. So it's just another piece of advice. Just add it to the bank, whatever it is. But when they hear it from somebody else, by the way, that's true even for us ourselves. We may know something, but when we hear the same thing from somebody else, it would have an impact on us. So anyway, it's good. That's why it's good to have somebody that is trusted, whether a family member, an uncle, or somebody that they like, they look up to, to use that basically to your advantage, in a way, to help reach the kids. Now, one thing that I would like to talk about today, I mean, we have two things, inshallah, that we'll be covering. One of them is about the concept of tafakkur, contemplation, and the other one is about science and religion. When we're talking about believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or developing a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do you develop that? How do you develop a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You know, sometimes people may have it by nature, by the way, the fitrah. The fitrah tells me that there is a God. You know, but sometimes the fitrah, the pure or the initial human nature gets contaminated with time and interacting with different ideologies or being exposed to all of the ideas. So it gets covered up. So how do you develop a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala normally? How do you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the great, the all-wise, the all-merciful. How do you develop a belief in that? You know, one of two ways. If you trust me and I tell you that Allah is all-merciful, okay, you'll take that. Yeah, I trust Him. He says Allah is merciful, I'll take what He says. Yes, Allah is merciful. But if you can see it yourself, it will be so much stronger. In other words, you can take somebody's words for it. Or the other way, and the much better way, is that if you see it yourself. In other words, I can look around me and contemplate from what I see around me and come to that conclusion myself. I can look for that. For example, and Allah has a greater example. Let's say, for example, we're talking about a certain artist, a great artist, Salvador Dali, if you're into him, or anybody else, since his stuff is questionable, but let's say his Dali, or, you know, and I can tell you there's somebody named Dali who is really a good painter, a good artist. He's really good and his paintings are really beautiful and nice and crazy and whatever it is. And yeah, okay, so he said Dali is a good artist, Dali is a good artist. Or you can look at his work and you can come to that conclusion, and that conclusion will be much stronger. So how do you judge an artist? How do you tell whether an artist is good? You look at his work. How can you tell that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is great? You look at His creation. You look at His ayat. And this is, by the way, an act of worship that we have largely neglected. And it's good to revive it, especially among our kids. What is called the ibadah of tafakkur. The worship of contemplation, of pondering. And you'll find that in the Quran, by the way, in many places. The verse is repeated a lot. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَفَكَّرُونَ or لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ. You know, many places repeated over and over in the Quran. فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى مِمَّا خُلِقَ فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى طَعَامِهِ سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. You know, حَتَّى يَبَيْنَهُمْ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. So Allah says that so they may think, they may ponder. Don't they look at their food? Don't they look at the world around them? Don't they look at the mountains, at the earth? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls us to contemplate, to think about these things. There was once an instance where a Sahabi named Ata, he said, once I went with Ubayd bin Umayr, after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, we went to Aisha, and she spoke to us from behind a veil. And we asked her, tell us something amazing about the Prophet ﷺ. They said that she cried and she said everything about him is amazing. Everything about him was amazing. But she said that one night, I remember, I sat next to him, his skin touched my skin, and then he told me that, leave me alone, I need to worship my Lord. So he went and he made wudu, and he started praying and crying, ﷺ, and he stayed like that all the way until Fajr. When Bilal bin Rabah came to him, and he says, Ya Rasulullah, what makes you cry like that? When Allah has forgiven everything to you. And the Prophet ﷺ said that, وَيْحَكَ يَا Bilal, how can I not cry when Allah revealed tonight, and He mentioned the verses in Ali Imran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ, I will translate, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتٍ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. So he said, how would I not cry when Allah has revealed these verses, when Allah says, indeed in the creation of the heaven and the earth are signs for the people of reason. People that remember Allah sitting and laying down, and they contemplate, they ponder about the creation of the heaven and the earth, and they conclude that Allah, you did not create that in vain. Glory be to you, protect us against hellfire. So here this is a call to contemplate, to think, to ponder. And you come to that conclusion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-powerful. That's why in the sunnah it was mentioned that sometimes basically a contemplation of an hour is better than an empty worship of a whole year. Because this is something that will change you from the inside out. And it is a good thing, again, to teach that to the kids. You know? And the ayats and the whole, actually, the Quran actually call us toward that. And subhanAllah, the more you learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more you see aspects of His greatness, the greater you see Him, and the more insignificant you see yourself. You know, if you're watching a big skyscraper from a distance, it would be very small. It's small. The closer you get to it, the bigger it becomes. And the smaller you become. Until you're right next to it and it's huge and you're nothing next to it. And the same thing when we're far from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't see how great He is. And we think of ourselves as, I'm the greatest, I'm the most powerful, I know everything and whatever it is. So knowing about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala humbles the person. SubhanAllah, there's a beautiful instance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when Allah revealed some verses from Surah Al-Mu'minun to Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, Prophet Muhammad was asking Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman to write down the revelation. So the Prophet was dictating and Hudayfa was writing down. So the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, again these are verse 12 and to 14. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the Prophet dictating to Hudayfa, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ سُلَالَةٍ مِنْ طِينٍ ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَاهُ نُطْفَةٍ فِي قَرَارٍ مَكِينٍ ثُمَّ خَلَقْنَا النُّطْفَةَ عَلَقَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْعَلَقَةَ مُضْغَةً فَخَلَقْنَا الْمُضْغَةَ عِظَامًا فَكَسَوْنَا الْعِظَامَ لَحْمًا ثُمَّ أَنْشَأْنَاهُ قَوْمًا خَلْقًا آخَرَ. And the Prophet paused in there. So here Allah is saying that we have created the human being from some clay and from droplets, and talks about the stages of creation. And it developed, and then the bones and the flesh and all of that. And he stopped in there. The Prophet paused in there. Then Hudayfa alayhi ridwanullah said, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. Glory be to Allah, the best or the greatest of the creators. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam smiled and he said, اُكْتُبْهَا فَهَكَذَا نَزَلَتْ. He said, write it down, that's how it came down. So Hudayfa said it before he heard the Prophet saying it. It was part of the verse. When he heard all of the above, all of the earlier things about the creation, the natural conclusions of that, the natural conclusion was that فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ. So he said it before the Prophet said it to him. So the conclusion of that verse is to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when the person ponders and thinks about the creation of Allah, then automatically he will glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we're talking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Azim or Badi'u as-Samawati wal-Ard, or even talking about something in your own life, by the way. For example, one of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is As-Sittir or As-Satir or As-Sattar, the one that conceals shortcomings. Now just look back at your own life. Do you see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was or has been As-Sattar with you? Oh yes. I mean, how many times have I done something wrong and Allah did not expose me? So now when I just look back and ponder, I come to that conclusion that Allah indeed is As-Sittir or As-Sattar, the one that conceals and covers up, that does not expose me. One of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala related to that is Al-Halim, the one who is patient. He does not send His punishment swiftly. Just look back at your own life. Was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Halim with you? Oh yes. I mean, how many times have I done something wrong that deserves to be punished, and Allah gave me time, gave me respite, gave me time to change, to correct. He does not change, He does not send His punishment swiftly. Allah says in the Quran, وَلَوْ يُؤَخِذُ اللَّهُ النَّاسَ بِمَا كَسَبُوا مَا تَرَكَ عَلَى ظَهْرِهَا مِنْ دَابَّةٍ. If Allah were to send His punishment swiftly, none of us would be alive. We'll all be gone. So you just look back at your own life and you come to that conclusion that Allah indeed has been Al-Halim with me. Allah indeed has been As-Sattar, the concealer with me, the all-patient with me. So this way you come to that conclusion, and that conclusion becomes firmly established in your heart. That's how you learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has 99 names. Pick any of them. And then ponder and contemplate that. By the way, we're talking about mentorship. My mentor used to actually give me a name each week. Sometimes we'll spend several weeks actually. Sometimes we'll spend several weeks with one name. And then we'll sit and we'll say, okay, what did you think? Give me some of your thinking, some of your contemplation, which is a good exercise because that's how you learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that sometimes there are certain things that are in our face, in front of us, but we don't think and ponder about them. When Allah says, فَلْيَنْظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ إِلَى طَعَامِهِ, let the person look at his food. It doesn't mean just looking at it, admiring it, oh, it's beautiful, it must taste really good. This is not what this is talking about. It means look at it and ponder about it. Yeah, subhanAllah, this food, where did it come from? You know how, subhanAllah, I just feed my face, so to speak, you know, and then after thinking, this is digested, it goes in here, that goes in there, you know, this is absorbed in there, this absorbed in there, you know. Well, this is an ayah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something that is as close to me as my own food, you know, that I don't just stop and then think about it. And Allah says, you know, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبْلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. Don't they think, don't they ponder? So all of these are calls for the person to think and to ponder. And the Quran is full of these things. These are the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The universal or the cosmic ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The sun is an ayah, the moon is an ayah. Everything. The insects are ayahs, full of ayahs in the word of insects. So these all tell us about the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points to us of how we were created and how we are today. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that sometimes the person will be ungrateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قُتِلَ الْإِنسَانُ مَا أَكْفَرَهُ مِنْ أَيِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقَهُ. I mean, the person is so ungrateful. How did he forget what he was created from? You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَكُم مِّن تُرَابٍ ثُمَّ إِذَا أَنْتُمْ بَشَرٌ تَنْتَشِرُونَ. He created you from dirt. And then you're spreading around, you know, doing things actually around you. So all of these actually are ayats for us to think and to ponder about. But I think when we're talking about contemplation, I think we have to be careful, again, not to go to the problem that sometimes the youth fall into, thinking that I can contemplate about everything, that I can think about everything and find any answer that I'm looking for simply by thinking about it. No, there are certain actually areas or certain aspects that your thinking cannot answer. And that has to do with anything of a metaphysical nature, anything of a ghaib. When it comes to the ghaib, you cannot use your mind because you don't have directions. You don't have information. I cannot extrapolate. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. If you were to think or ponder or contemplate about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said contemplate His names and attributes and do not contemplate His self. وَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُوا بِذَاتِهِ فَأَنَّكُمْ لَن تَقْدِرُوهُ قَدْرًا. You will not do justice to Him. Why? Because our mind, our imagination, as rich as it might be, it has limitations. You know, everything that we think of exists within the dimension of time and space. So for something to exist beyond the time and space dimensions becomes something that is impossible for us to think about. You know, as intelligent as the person might be, there are still so much limitations to what the mind can tell that person. That's why we do not think about the self of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that's beyond our capacity. We cannot. That's beyond our capacity. You want to think, you want to contemplate, think about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How merciful He is, how great He is, how generous He is, how patient He is. All of these names and attributes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, but never the self of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because sometimes, like I said, you fall into so many traps that would be impossible for you to realize. Let me give you an example. And the Prophet mentioned that sometimes some people will say, okay, well, God created this and God created that. So who created God? The Prophet mentioned that. He said that. And he said when that comes to your mind, basically, to read Surah Al-Ikhlas, because it talks about the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to explain a little bit, something that Al-Banna, actually, Imam Al-Banna mentioned, commenting on that. He said that Imagine, let's say, for example, I left this bottle in here, I go out, I came back, this is perfectly flat, and the bottle is there. So what's going to come to my mind is that somebody moved the bottle, right? I mean, the bottle is not going to jump on its own, but moved the bottle. But let's say, for example, I'm sitting here, and my dear Ahmed here is sitting there. I go out, and when I came back, he's sitting in the other chair. I'm not going to think who moved Ahmed, because what applies to the bottle does not apply to Ahmed. Ahmed can move on his own, right? So the questions are not to be applied to everyone or to every situation. When the person asks, who created Allah? The assumption there is that Allah is created, and I'm looking for the one who created him. Well, wait a minute. Was Allah created? Of course not. That's what the question itself is wrong. It's like, for example, when you say, again, using my dear Ahmed in here again. If Ahmed were to fly, how high up can he go? And we start arguing, I think it's 1 mile, no, 2 miles. Well, wait a minute, can he fly? That's why the question itself is wrong. Asking the question itself is wrong. The problem is with the question. And for us to try to find an answer for a question like that becomes problematic. So when the person says, who created Allah? The assumption for that question is that Allah was created. And I'm trying to find out who created him. Well, wait a minute, was he created? That's why the question itself is wrong. You should not even ask that question. Now, of course, this example is an obvious example. But much of the time, it is not as obvious as that. That's why when it gets to the self of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our mind falls into all sorts of such traps. So we stay away from that. That's why when it comes to anything of a ghaib nature, anything of a metaphysical nature, we do not use our mind. And here we take the text as it was given to us. So in other words, if Allah told us something, or the Prophet told us something about something of a ghaibi nature, we take it as it is. We do not extrapolate, we do not use our mind to explain some of these things. Because here we're talking about a different form of existence that is governed by different rules. Let me give an example. The Prophet ﷺ said that a good righteous person, when he's put in the grave, his grave will be wide, 70 cubits on each side, huge grave. The person who is a bad person, his grave will be very tight, very tight. So if you bury a bad person next to a good person, and the good person has a huge space, does that mean that the bad person will benefit from this free space from the other person? Because the 70 cubits will include the other person. Of course not. Here we're talking about a different form of existence governed by different laws altogether. And by the way, you have an example of that even in this world. You may have two people sleeping next to one another, one seeing a beautiful dream, one seeing a nightmare. It doesn't rub off. It doesn't go across. And this is in this world. So let alone in the ghaib or in a different form of existence. So here when we're talking about, and this is something to be taught to the youth by the way, that when we're talking about using the mind is to recognize the limitations of our minds. That there are certain areas where my mind actually stops. It's not capable. My mind cannot answer all the questions. It's not whatever conclusion I come to, this has to be the absolute truth. And I think these things have to be explained. So this is a little bit about actually developing, again, a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by contemplating His names and attributes. Any question or comment before we move on to the next topic? About this, what I mentioned. About the ibadah of tafakkur, the worship of contemplation, of pondering. Any question or comment? Going once, going twice? Yes?
How would you apply it? How do you put that into a practical thing that we can do with our teenagers?
Without what?
That we can do with the teenagers.
Well, I think it's good to teach them that, by the way. I mean, subhanAllah, I taught it to my younger sister when she was even younger than a teenager. It's a good exercise, But of course, you have to speak at their level. You don't want to get too complicated or sophisticated when it comes to the thinking, using some philosophical things that they can't even understand, But tell them that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for example, was the all generous. Do you see that Allah was all merciful, was with you? How Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought you parents to take care of you, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought you this and brought you that, when other people don't have what you have. So anyway, at their level. But to get them to make the association, I think this is the good thing. That when I see something beautiful, I don't want to just think about the thing itself, but I want to think about the maker of that. You know, some people look at a piece of art and they will say, oh, this is a beautiful piece of art. This is nice. Some people will look at the same piece of art, they will say, oh, this was done by a great artist. And I think this is the kind of thinking that you want to instill in their heart, to help them make the association. When you see a beautiful sunset, well, this is how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. He created this. When you see a beautiful flying over the cloud in the airplane, you know, seeing this nice, beautiful thing, that's what Allah has created. You know, if this world is this, how beautiful, what about Al-Jannah? To make always this connection, you know, to make, you know, that not just seeing something, yeah, we enjoy what we're looking at, but to actually come to a conclusion from that, to get them into that kind of a mindset. Any other comments? Now, the other topic of course that I said we want to discuss is the issue of basically science and religion. And this actually is, or has been, a problem actually with some of the youth when they get exposed to science. And I think much of it is because actually they don't understand exactly what science is, or maybe what religion actually does. But I want to mention something really important as a short introduction before starting the discussion, is that in Islam there's no discrepancy or conflict between the two. That's why if you look actually historically, you'll find that the Muslims excelled in science when they were closely connected with religion. So you'll find some of the greatest scholars are firmly established, scientific scholars, you know, scientists, firmly established in religion. There was no separation. But in the West, the path took a completely different direction. In the West, they excelled in science when they separated religion from science, because there was an issue between one and the other. But in Islam, we don't have that. Actually, everything connects to the other. These are just tools that lead to the same conclusion. So you find, like I said, that some of the greatest actually scientists were also firmly established in religions. Like, of course, the father of algebra. Who was the father of algebra? Algebra comes from Arabic. Yes, Omar. Al-Khawarizmi, Allah barik fik. You know, algebra comes from Arabic. Who was the father of optics? Ibn al-Haytham. Al-Haytham, as he's called. You know, by the way, the camera, he's the one that invented the camera. Camera comes from Arabic word qamara. The camera obscura, the thing, the box, and how the image is reversed and all of that. He's the one that invented that. You know, Ibn al-Haytham. You know, you have Ibn Sina and Al-Razi and all of these great names, and by some women, by the way, as well. You know, the oldest university in existence today. The oldest university. What is the oldest university? Don't tell me UCLA. The oldest university in existence today. Yes, Ya Umar.
It's
in Morocco. The University of Qayrawain. You know, and this was established by a woman, by the way, Fatima al-Fihri. By the way, how old is it? It's more like 1,200 years old. So we're not talking about like 100 years old. It's that old, you know. And it was established by a woman, by a Muslim woman. You know? So that's why the contribution came from both, when they were connected with the deen. But you'll find in the West, the direction was the opposite. They only developed science when they left their religion out. Because theirs actually contradicts, but ours does not. Why is that important? Because sometimes we import problems that may not be existent for us. So let's say, for example, we find some Christians raising some scientific concern or some issues with science, so we raise the same issues. Well, wait a minute, we don't have that issue ourselves. They have a contradiction, we don't have that contradiction. And I'll mention an example today. But when we're talking about science and religion, if you were to define science, what would that be? A brief definition of science. Science is. Don't tell me what science does, but science is. That's the definition. Science is fun. What is science?
The method whereby the method where you gather a phenomenon and then you prove it by testing the phenomenon.
Okay, so this is the first part is the definition. The second part is the method. Yes. I'll come to that. Part of it is yes, you have something back. Let's say that. The what? Again, we would slow down, not shut up so fast. Say it again.
It's like the further understanding of the world around us.
Okay.
And how like different things in this world impact other things, and just pretty much a shorter way of defining how this world works, making our lives.
Okay, so this is what it does. Yes, go ahead.
The microphone.
What do I do with it? Yeah.
Put it in your jacket.
This, like this?
Yes.
Is this good enough?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, sure.
Yes.
You know, science, there are different definitions of it. One of them is that science is a tool. Science is a tool to acquire information about the physical world using observation and experimentation. That's what it is. So science gives you information, but information specifically about the physical world. You know, using as a tool, the tool that science uses is observation and experimentation. What about religion? Of course, you know, Islam is the religion, you know. But in general, definition of religion, let me give it to you, because there are so many definitions about it, right? And it's confusing, you know, as really there's so many definitions. But you can say that, to parallel the definition of science, that religion is a tool to acquire information about the metaphysical,
Not physical.
not the physical, the metaphysical, using revelation.
Not experiment.
So here, it is, first of all, that the real or the target of religion is the metaphysical, the ghaib. The target of science is the physical world. One of them uses observation and experimentation for the physical. The other one uses revelation for the metaphysical. So as such, science and religion have two different scopes. They deal with different things. They don't deal with the same things, even though they may overlap sometimes, and I'll come to that. And as such, they use different tools. Because they deal with different targets, they use different tools. So a person cannot say, I want to be able to see the metaphysical in order for me to believe in it. Well, wait, seeing normally works with the physical, not with the metaphysical. So you cannot use a tool for one to judge the other. Because they're talking about different things. The same thing, a person cannot, let's say, I have to measure, you know, depression by bringing a measuring tape. It doesn't. That doesn't measure that. And they said, because some people say, well, unless I see it, I don't believe in it. Well, what are you going to see? There are many things that actually you believe in without even seeing. Even in the physical world, by the way. Everybody believes in gravity. What does gravity look like? How big is gravity? How tall? We don't ask these questions. It's a different thing. So the tools basically are appropriate for the specific field that we're dealing with. So science and religion deal with different things, but sometimes they overlap. The reason they overlap sometimes because you have to indicate the oneness of the person's existence, or sometimes there might be some implications. Like for example, the Quran uses some scientific things to prove that this is not a book by a human being. The fact about the shape of the earth, the embryological development, the fact that the gender of the fetus is determined by the father and not by the mother. It is mentioned in the Quran. ألم يكن نطفة من مني يمنى ثم كان علقة فخلق فسوى وجعل منه الزوجين الذكر والأنثى منه المني اليمنى يعني so it comes from the father. So the father dictates again or determines what comes from the father determines the gender. So this is something that's scientific that is mentioned in the Quran to prove that this is not a book of a human being. But the Quran is not meant to be a book of science. Like once somebody asked me, what does the Quran say about dinosaurs? I said, why should the Quran say anything about dinosaurs? It says nothing. The Quran is not meant to be a book of natural history. The Quran is meant to be a book of guidance. And as a book of guidance, it is perfect. But the Quran does not mention everything. It does not. It is not meant. The Quran is perfect in what is meant to be. But the Quran is not meant to be a book of natural history. So it doesn't say anything about dinosaurs. So again, the big question then comes about evolution. Now, before I get into that, when you're talking about basically science and religion being basically two different tools in the area where they overlap. Now, if science is correct and the religion is correct, they should lead to the same conclusion, right? If you're talking about one specific conclusion, one specific area, if science is correct and the religion is true, they should lead to the same conclusion. If they lead to different conclusions, then one of them is faulty, one of them is not correct, or maybe that we did not understand it correctly ourselves. Are you following? Mm-hmm. So when would that happen? So science, first of all, can be certain and can be uncertain. See, not all of science is conclusively certain. By the way, I'm talking as a scientist myself. Sometimes we think if it's coming from science, it has to be absolutely true. No, it is not correct. It is not correct. You know, even in scientific research, the results are proven by a statistical analysis, which is normally presented with a certain level of confidence level, a percentage. Yeah, it's all probabilistic, you know. So it will say, for example, you can prove scientifically, you know, whatever it is, that this happened or that happened. But that is not a conclusive statement. You know, statistically, I can prove to you that the earth is flat. And it doesn't take much work, by the way. I'm not dismissing the scientific, by the way, method or the statistical analysis, but what I'm saying is that not everything that is coming from science is conclusive and certain. Actually, most of it is not certain. And I'm not dismissing science, by the way. But what I'm saying is that not all of it is certain. What is certain in science? The certain things are the physical laws or some of the facts. These are certain. Something like that, you know, is certain. But when it comes to the research or some of the information, there are many theories. Actually, there are more theories than there are laws, far more theories than there are laws. So not all of science is certain. It can be, again, think of science. Here we have science that can be certain or uncertain. The same thing about the religion, by the way. It can be certain, it can be uncertain. What is certain in the religion? What would be something that is certain?
God exists. The existence of God.
That's an example of that. You know, the certain thing is that we're talking about, again, religion through revelation. So we're talking about a text. Something that is certain in the religion is a text that is authentic and conclusive, and the meaning is clear. The Quran is all conclusive in its authenticity, but not in its meaning, not clear in its meaning. There are certain texts in the Quran that support multiple meanings, right? Allah says in the Quran, in the beginning of Surah Al-Imran, you know, هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخرى متشابهات. That there are certain verses in the Quran that support multiple meanings. Now these verses I cannot put in the certain. They are what's called قطعي الثبوت. They are conclusive in their authenticity, but the meaning can be multiple. So this will go under the uncertain. So the certain in the religion is that which is conclusively authentic and has a clear deterministic meaning. So when the meaning is not clear, or that the text is not authentic, it is not certain. Now, in that which is certain in science, so science can be certain and uncertain, religion can be certain and uncertain. In that which is certain in both, there's no contradiction. So far we have not found any contradiction in Islam. No contradiction. And we don't believe there will ever be a contradiction. If there was any contradiction, it's because one of them is certain, the other is uncertain, or both of them are uncertain. Are you following? Okay? Or both of them are actually uncertain. That's why, so what is the relationship between Islam and science? Again, if both are certain, they will not lead to different conclusions. And this is, by the way, only in the area of overlap. Because normally they have two different scopes, right? In the area of overlap, they should not lead to different conclusions unless one of them is uncertain. Or both of them are actually are uncertain. So what about evolution? And this is the big thing, of course. You know, this is really the big thing. And people are just so passionate about defending or attacking the evolution. Some people, and this is, by the way, not because of, it's an interesting theory, but because of the implications of that. And it comes mostly, by the way, from the non-Muslims. Because from the non-Muslim, it talks about creationism, basically. That everything is created as it is, you know. So when you have somebody saying that, well, no, they do not exist as it is. They developed as a result of a gradual change, you know, from one species to the other and whatnot, you know. So they have a problem with that. They have a problem with that. What does Islam say about the origin of species? Nothing. It does not say anything. So in other words, if you can prove that evolution, except for the creation of Adam, which I will come to, by the way, in a minute. So if you can prove that evolution happened, Islam does not have any problem with it. So the issue that they raise in the other religions, we don't have that. If somebody can prove that evolution did happen the way Darwin described it, Islam does not have any problem with it. That's fine, it's fine. But I can tell you scientifically, it doesn't seem to be actually what happened. When you tell me that what happened, I don't know what happened, but I know what did not happen. Is that maybe there's another version of the theory that maybe we'll discover later on, but the way that he presented it does not explain the origin of species scientifically, by the way, despite the wide acceptance, despite the claimed authenticity and the wide acceptance, but it is not. It is not. You know, evolution is a time process that takes millions of years, and nobody has seen it actually in action. So all you do is you look at some things that you have today and you reconstruct a model that goes back in history, right? That's what it does. And that itself introduces a lot of error. So scientifically, it doesn't look to be actually what happened. It does not look really what happened. But in Islam, we don't have any problem with it if you can prove that some of that actually did happen. Or that it did happen, or whatever new theory people, actually scientists, might come up with. Islam does not say anything about the origin of species except for Adam. We believe Adam actually came as he is. Now you tell me, what about all those, you know, humanoids? What looks like the Lucy and all of these things. And of course, these are pieces, and they're reconstructed from small pieces of bones. I think those may be just species that have existed and have gone extinct, just like dinosaurs did. Something like that. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't have to give an explanation of actually what happened, but I know what did not happen. I know what did not happen. So as far as Islam is concerned, when it comes to the evolution, we don't have any problem with it. Islam does not say it happened, does not say it did not happen. But I can tell you scientifically, it seems not to explain the origin of species. It is lacking some huge gaps. The links are still largely missing, actually, in the whole tree of evolution and whatnot. 10 minutes? Okay. By the way, if anybody, I have a detailed discussion in my book that I mentioned. Yes, sister.
So, I mean, as far as we know, Adam alayhi salam was the first species on Earth, right?
Yes. Human.
Human.
Yes.
Human.
Yeah,
Yes.
sorry, human. And then after that, he had children, and
Yes.
those were the ones who followed the race.
Yes. It's,
So,
yeah.
isn't this the explanation of evolution?
No, because you see, Adam alayhi salam was created as he was, in his own image. In other words, he did not change. He was a human being like us. He did not look like an ape or whatever it is. No, he looked like a human being, just like a regular human being. That's what he was. Alayhi salam.
But isn't this the way Islam explains evolution? Or
No, but see, evolution, when you're talking about evolution, means he changed. In other words, it's like, for example, what he was is different than what we are today. But we're not. It's still the same. So just give me a second. Just give me a second. We're still actually the same. We have not changed. So we did not. So when you say evolution, it means there was a change, you know. But we did not change. We're just human. We're still as human as he was at that time. Yes. No, I'm sorry. He was first. Go ahead.
This is just a theory. I just like
Speak up a little.
I just like to print things that evolution doesn't say that we evolved from apes directly. It said we and apes evolved from ancestors.
Yes.
So rather, we evolved further into intelligence, but apes evolved in a different character and strength over intelligence and evolved, perhaps.
No, and I think, you know, see, what we're talking about, what I'm talking about is I'm separating basically the human from that whole tree, that whole sequence. That's what I said. Is that whole sequence might have happened, might not have happened, you know, if you can prove it. But I'm saying that the human was not part of that. The human in particular was not part of that. That's what I was saying. Yes?
So like, how do I say it? Like, off of theology and off evolutionary things.
Listen, please, I'm sorry.
Like, are we really allowed to adopt any sort of like theory of what happened before us, as
Yes.
long as it's science?
Yes, that's fine. That's exactly what I'm talking about, is that Islam does not say what happened. So it is left up to science to tell you actually what happened. You know? But what I'm saying is that you want to make sure that you do not give science more than it deserves. That sometimes there are other factors that contribute, by the way, to the spread of certain theories. The example is specifically that the Darwinian theory. You know, when we're talking about, by the way, when was Darwin published? Anybody knows? 1860 something. Yes. And of course, when he's talking about, of course, evolution, the key factor in there is the genes, basically, that the genetic has to pass it down, and whatever it is. You know, that's when the new Darwinists actually came. But when was the gene discovered?
19
100. Grégoire Mendel, which means after the evolution theory actually was published, right? So if you think about it, there was no explanation when he was widely accepted. People accepted him before they understood him. Because he came at the right time and the right place. You know, the time that he came, there was another, by the way, scientist who was about to publish something exactly what Darwin actually said, but he beat him. Yes, exactly, but he beat him, you know. That's what they said, he just came at the right time and the right place where people are looking to loosen the grip of the church, basically. And here comes somebody who provided a scientific basis for that. That's why they just jumped on him and they accepted him. So it is not just the merit of the theory, but it's the surrounding, basically, political and social landscape that contributed to the acceptance of that theory. That's why he was so widely accepted. Yes?
I would like to add, I think we all have to agree that the research method, where every time you publish anything in your PhD thesis, you are opening the door to thousands and thousands of students around the universe to debate your belief and your theory. So you have to accept as well that the whole theory of evolution being tested and argue against it and for it by hundreds of thousands of people around the universe. And that's why it's widely accepted. It's not coming from any book of Revelation.
Yes.
And it's been proved left and right, and people argue against it, and it's proved to be correct.
Wait. You're making quick statements, you know, that have not been substantiated. You know, to say that proven correctness is something I have a problem with.
A lot of Muslim scholars believe it's correct. And if you look at the theory of the Lucy and also the Neanderthal and so many other skeleton that believe that it came from the evolution, it doesn't mean it comes from Adam. We are mostly believe that it's correct. All this skeleton it was there in this universe,
yes,
but maybe have nothing to do with Adam. And by the way, that scientifically, they don't care or they don't even prove it's coming from Adam. They really
yes. Well, see, that's what I said. If it has been proven, if it can be proven, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem with that. But my question is, has it been proven? And I think that's really what I'm questioning. And I think a lot of the time people basically just become more dogmatic about accepting certain things. Like, for example, when Dawkins says, well, the evolution is as certain as the earth revolving around the sun. I think that statement is completely false, you know. Another has been proven without any doubt. And there's a lot of question about a statement that is made like that, you know. But if that or any other theory has been proven, that's fine. That's fine. That's exactly my point. Is that
doesn't deny there was a species beside Adam.
yes. Exactly. So that's exactly. But again, I think and now here I'm not arguing, by the way, from a religious perspective. I'm just talking about from the scientific perspective. Is that, see, much of the time when you're looking and try to reconstruct even Lucy itself, Lucy itself, you have few pieces of bone and you're reconstructing the whole, because what's been preserved is only the bones. The soft tissues is something that nobody knows actually exactly what they look like, you know. So you're trying to reconstruct the whole organism from pieces of bone. But the bones do not give you all the information about an organism. For example, if you were to look at the marsupials, like the kangaroo, you know, that only exists in the Australian continent, you know. If you just look at the skeleton, there's no way you can tell that they're marsupials. Even though this is something that is really major about the way, even the marsupials, what I'm talking about, when the gestation partly actually is spent outside in a pouch. You know what I'm talking about, right? You know, versus the placental where everything actually happens inside. So there's something called the Tasmanian wolf, and there's the regular placental wolf. Their skeleton look exactly the same, but they're completely different organisms. So the bones do not give you all the information, what I'm saying, you know. But still, if you can prove something like that happened, it's fine, it's fine. But I think, you know, to say that has been proven, I think that's a big statement. How much have we? 5 minutes? Okay. Yes?
I think even the scientific society agrees on that. They call themselves, like, we have academic amnesia, and then they jump on the wagon for some things and push certain ideas when the momentum is. So there are biases in all these. And because they are run by humans who have agenda sometimes, and sometimes they're not aware of their agenda. But like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, we were not like fat wasn't the enemy. Now it's sugar the enemy, and the egg has cholesterol was done by a research with against eggs. Then eggs now is good. It's like all sorts of biases. And like you said, Doctor, we follow the scientific significance, the statistical significance, but the research design might be all faulty, because it is. I mean, a lot of time it's limited. How much you cannot account the world in research design. And you come out of it with scientific significance, but to start with, it's very messy.
Not only that, by the way, but sometimes certain voices are louder than others. I don't want to dismiss the scientific research, and there are debates that are already actually going in there, but certain voices are louder than others. But if you look at the same time, you do find within the scientific community some people that have a strong faith or strong belief in that. This is not to say that all of the scientists then automatically are categorized as being, atheists or believing in this or believing in that, The scientific community is largely diverse, but certain voices are louder than others. And the debate is there, the debate actually remains in there. And I think one of the problems is that today, because of the increased specialization in science, some scientists may fail to see the bigger picture. But they're just so focused actually within their own fields, it is difficult to step back and then question something. Especially when you have fields that are actually developed in terms of that evolution, by the way. Fields like, for example, taxonomy, for example. The naming organism or the phylogeny and the phylology and all of these things that are developed based on that. So it's difficult for now the scientists see things in light of that evolutionary tree. So it's difficult to step back and re-question that because it's explained in its terms. There was a nice sitcom called Happy Days. Anybody familiar with it? I guess I'm the only one. Well, what happened is that in one of the episodes, I don't know if it's something inappropriate or something, one of the episodes, the Fonz wanted to marry somebody. And his friend, Richie, knew that this lady is not good news. She is not a good lady. So he wanted to warn him. Tell him that, why are you marrying her? And the Fonz says, because she's an honest and sincere person. So Fonzie said, how do you know she's honest? Fonzie says, well, she told me that she is. Richie told him, what if she's lying to you? And Fonzie said, honest people don't lie. In other words, he's assuming already that she is before he... And a lot of time we do something like that, by the way. We do something like that. Khair, inshallah, I think we have to stop. Khair, inshallah, jazakumullah khair. We'll stop here and I'll give it back.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Imad. Inshallah, we all learn from this and can take many of these lessons back into our lives. And as children, we make it easier for our parents. And as parents, I'm not a parent, but it's easy for you guys, inshallah, Rabbil Alameen. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر جزاك الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله
أكرمكم الله.